here. So my apologies to everyone on the recording right now. All right, well, here we go again. Rain Gardens 101, get your lawn a job. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming back for day three. I'm Matthew Bertrand. I'm your host for today. And today I'm actually joined by several special guests. I've got Marie Everett and Brenda Dietrich, who are master rain gardeners, who halfway through today's session are going to share their experiences as residents designing and building their own rain gardens. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be pretty exciting. And I'm also joined today by Laura Edwards with Friends of the Rouge. So I'm going to get started now, as I have the last 2 days, with the blatant teaser of the door prizes. So as for the last 2 days, you'll have an opportunity at the end, whether you're watching the recording or watching live, to enter your name in the hat for a door prize drawing for a 55-gallon rain barrel or for a virtual consultation with yours truly. So stay tuned for that. And for those of you that didn't get your entries in on day 2, that link is fixed and we can get that to you as well. All right, so day 3, get your lawn a job. We talked about on day 1, the what, the whys, and the wheres. Day 2, sizing and digging. Day 3 today, we're gonna talk about plants, RAINSMART, and we'll have that Master Rain Gardener panel. So like yesterday, like yesterday, we're gonna start with a little bit of information about Friends of the Rouge. Friends of the Rouge has been around since 1986, and we've got a vision for the Rouge River watershed. We envision this river being the center of communities along the river. We want to see this a clean, vibrant, thriving river that you and your family can go and enjoy, whether it's for fishing or for kayaking, for scenic hikes. This is a river system that is one for the record books. We've been calling it the watershed of all watersheds, one of the most urbanized rivers in the country, a really inspiring place to be and to explore, and we'll hope you'll be a part of the effort to restore it, to make it even better for future generations. And your rain garden at home is a key part of that effort. This event today has been brought to you by Pure Oakland Water and by the City of Southfield. Hope you'll all give a round of applause to those 2 key sponsors. The event is also supported by the Master Rain Gardener Program, which was founded by the Washington County Water Resources Commissioner's Office. So day 3, as with days 1 and 2, we'll have a quiz on sizing, styling, and digging to catch us up. For those of you that are just joining us today. So as before, right, I'm gonna quiz you all. You better answer. You've got about 2 seconds and you better get it right. And I'm gonna know using my magic powers here. So how big should this garden be? Here's our imaginary house. The pink area here is our area of hard surface that's gonna be draining to this rain garden down here. So how big does this need to be for a typical house? 2 seconds, go. All right, yep, you got it right. So the 20% rule, right? So for our typical rain garden, the rain garden is going to be sized at about 20% of the overall size of that hard area draining to the garden. And typically the garden is going to be about 6 inches deep. So that means you can have a really small rain garden, right? If you've got a small patio here like Mallory does in Ann Arbor, you can have a really small rain garden attached to it. And I absolutely recommend start as small as you can for the first one. You get that practice on something relatively easy, and then you can build onto better, bigger things in the future. And part of that is, when you've got multiple roof areas, right, draining down to different gutters, if you can build one small rain garden for each gutter rather than one big garden getting water from all those gutters, that's going to make your life a lot easier as you're getting started. I think that's really the best way to go. And so, if you're in a house like this, especially where you've got a huge canvas that you can be working on, people tend to try to build the gardens in the low point, that swale area right there where all the water from all the gutters is draining to. That's the hardest area to work in. You're getting water from all these different places. It's going to mean a giant garden, and it's also often going to be an issue with a high water table, right? You're in the lowest point of your landscape there. That's going to be the point where potentially the water table is going to be the biggest issue. So if you can back up and along each one of those downspouts do a smaller garden, maybe connected to any foundation plantings that are already there 10 feet away from the home, that's going to be your best bet, is several small gardens rather than one giant garden. And it's great because then you can start small. You can pick the smallest one to start with. And then as a reminder, if you've got clay soils, and I'm talking not just clay soils, but heavy clay soils especially, this is going to change a little bit. That 20% rule is going to change more into the 30% rule, and you're going to make it more shallow, 3 inches to spread and sink that water. And then if you are blessed with crazy sandy soil, you can make that garden potentially smaller, as small as 10% and deeper, as deep as 9 inches, possibly more, depending on the circumstances. So some minor variations there. And then lastly, this will be my how to encapsulate digging into a 5-second clip here. We talked about 3 strategies, and I recommend for you the balanced approach, where you dig a little bit from the upslope area, you pile a little bit in the downslope area to make a berm, and then you're good to go. And this is a photo from Brenda Dietrich's garden. Brenda, I don't know if I told you that I stole this photo from you. So Brenda's going to tell you a little bit more about this later on as well. All right, so that's our recap. So days 1 and 2, you've got your sizing, you've got your digging orientation. Now we're going to talk about plants. And the reason we talk about plants last, right, because we're here to talk about gardens. People normally want to start talking about plants. We wait till the last to talk about plants because all of that question about the location, the sizing, the depth, all of that is going to really dictate what plants are going to survive. And so we want to wait to get to plants until we've worked through those first details. Sometimes maybe you've got your favorite plant. Maybe you'll go back and revise a little bit to make sure you can squeeze that favorite plant in. But typically plants are the last thing that we're going to want to talk about. So plants. So we're going to talk about rain garden plants now. The thing I want you to come away with is that it's a rough life for a rain garden plant. They've got a lot that they need to do, right? So they need to absorb 3 to 6 inches of ponding water. It's not a water garden, right? The water is not going to be there for longer than 48 hours. We're not building a pond, we're building a rain garden. So it's got 3 to 6 inches of standing water for 48 hours, but then it's got drought. You got to be able to deal with drought with this rain garden. And this picture is showing a southern exposure rain garden next to brick. There's a lot of reflected heat coming in. This ends up being a really dry spot for part of the year. And then right now, right, we've had a drought for about 2-3 weeks, something like that. You don't want to have to be out there watering those plants. And so what defines a rain garden plant really is a plant that can take that 3 to 6 inches of water, but then it can also take drought. So those are really extreme conditions. Not every plant can survive that. The plants also have to look good, right? We want these plants to look great. The best argument for more rain gardens is rain gardens that look stellar. That's called cultural sustainability. It's aesthetic sustainability. It's the idea that when we make rain gardens look good, more people do them. And when we add up to that 1,000 rain garden goal by 2025, that's how we really hit sustainability as a community. It's not just a couple people doing the perfect rain gardens. It's having everyone do gardens that are appropriate for them, that are looking good. And looking good is part of how we get there. So part of meeting these goals is, and I'm sorry to bring this up, it's weeding, right? It's the thing nobody wants to talk about, but it's really important for any garden, and it's especially important for rain gardens. So this is a picture showing the Malletts Creek Library when it was built and designed, beautiful native plants, and then after it was neglected for a while and all the weeds that popped up in there. So when you design and build your rain garden, you're going to want to be ready for the first 3 years especially to provide intensive weeding maintenance. After that, if you design it right, it becomes a pretty low maintenance garden. But you've got to be ready to weed it for those first few years. And don't worry, the good news, the thing about plants, right, that people don't necessarily think about, a lot of people think, you go to the store, you buy your plant, you plug it in the landscape, and boom, you're good. It's like a chair, like buying a chair where you just buy it and you're done with it. Plants are a little bit more like puppies. Right, they need a little bit of maintenance. And right, yesterday was, I think, National Dog Day. So we're going to talk about dogs as much as we can today in relation to our rain gardens. So plants are more like puppies; they need to be taken care of. And we're going to try to teach you today how to design your garden so that it's as low maintenance as possible, but you need to be ready for a little bit. The good news is it is never too late. So this is that Malletts Creek Library system. It got the loving care that it needed to take care of those weeds, and it's looking great today. It's an incredible library with a wonderful rain garden in front of it. We also want our rain gardens to create habitat. And we talked about this on day 1, some of the whys, the values of rain gardens. The native plants that we put in rain gardens provide such wonderful value to support the pollinators, the butterflies, the songbirds that we want to bring to our gardens. It's a very important value, and it's really the native plants that we're putting in our gardens that are providing this. And then one of the last major things we want these plants to do is we want them to grow and thrive. And that really comes from the old adage of finding the right plant for the right place. And that's really the tricky thing with rain gardens, is figuring out, what in the different levels of the rain garden are going to be the right plants that are going to thrive. We want you to buy the right plants at the start so that you save as much money as possible. We don't want you to be experimenting and trying this plant and that plant and running into challenges. We want you to pick the right plants right off. So you see on the left, plants thriving rather than on the right, plants struggling. So the key with a rain garden, that's like and unlike other gardens, right? Like, you need to be factoring in sun conditions like any other garden, part sun and shade. You need to be thinking about the soils. We've talked about clay versus sandy soils already. Those are going to be really important variables that tell you how well a plant is going to survive. And then lastly is the hydrology. And this really relates to the soils, but it's also the size and the depth, right? How wet is the garden going to get? Are you able to pick plants that can survive given how wet it's going to be? And the good news is that rule of thumb that we've given you, the 20% rule and the 6-inch depth, that's going to make it so that the plant lists that we provide you are going to work pretty well for your garden. And as we mentioned yesterday, sometimes you can't make a garden that's going to meet that sizing. Sometimes it's going to be a smaller garden. That's basically going to mean you're going to have a wetter garden. If you've got a smaller garden or if you've got a deeper garden, it means you've got wetter and wetter spots. And so you can just plan for wetter plants that can tolerate the water better. But so these are the factors that you want to think of when you're looking at plants for your garden. So the next thing I want you to think about are the different zones in your rain garden. All right, so you've got the high and dry zone. The berm area oftentimes ends up falling in this category, or just upland next to the garden, next to where you dig it. The conditions in this area tend to be dry to medium. And my key for this, right, is going to be dry, medium, moist, and wet. So dry, medium, moist, and then down here in the bottom, we've got wet. So in that upland area next to the rain garden or in the berm, it's going to be dry to medium in terms of wet conditions. Along the side slope, and this is an excessively steep side slope shown here, we've got a variety of conditions. It might be dry, medium, it might be up to moist. There's going to be some variable conditions there. Then the very, very bottom, that's going to be where it's wettest. And there it's going to be typically in the medium to wet range. Your soils are going to be important for this, as I mentioned. So if you've got really sandy soils, it's all going to be more on the left side. So really dry in that berm area and the upland area, dry along the edge, and in that bottom area, dry to medium potentially. So in the bottom area for a sandy garden, you can put a whole lot of plants that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being rain garden plants, actually, just because of how quickly water soaks in a sandy garden. And Marie's going to talk to you a little bit about that for her garden coming up. But if you've got heavy, heavy clay, the other extreme, then the bottom of that rain garden is going to be wet for much of the year. And so you need plants that can tolerate really, really wet conditions. All right, so that's the schema I want you to think about, the different planting zones and some of the moisture levels. And thankfully, you can come back to the recording for this and pause and think through this more for your home. Now, to help you figure out what plants are going to go into those areas, on our website, therouge.org/plants, you can find plant lists. We've got 3 of them on there. So one, we've got a visual top 20 most reliable plants for rain gardens. These plants tend to tolerate a really wide variety of conditions, from drought levels to sun conditions as well. Some plants can really handle all sun and most moisture levels. So it's going to be a lot of these plants that are just really hardy, tested plants that can survive most conditions. The next resource on there is a downloadable recommended plant list. And this was developed by Washtenaw County's Master Rain Gardener program over 10 years with feedback from residents as they've tried plants and they've reported back on their experiences. So this is a gold mine of plant information for you, for those that are not of the faint of heart and that can manage a really long plant list. And then the last list I have on there, it's common ornamental plants for rain gardens. These are plants that have not been tested much in rain gardens. These are the plants you can find in most nurseries, and some of these plants may survive in rain gardens. So for those of you that are more traditional plant gardeners, you can look at that to get yourself started thinking about plants that might work in your garden. Typically, those plants are going to be ones that don't like the bottom of the basin, unless maybe you're in sandy conditions. They'll probably work well on the edges, especially if you're rain garden. The spots of the rain garden, they're not quite as moist. So maybe a little farther away from the inlet where the water is coming in, maybe the other side of your garden. All right, I'm gonna dive a little bit more into that big, crazy long plant list now, because I wanna tease it apart for you a little bit to show you some of the resources that are on there. So if we zoom in on this thing a little bit, this is some of the information that is on there. It's a lot of typical information you might find. There's deer resistance on there, places you can get the plants, sun, shade conditions, and here's what I really want to point out for you, moisture levels. So that same key that I showed you for the upland slope bottom area, it's got that information for these plants in terms of what they can tolerate. So this ends up being a very useful sheet for you. After you've sized your garden, you've got your rough shape for the garden, you know what its depth is going to be, you know what your soils are, you can start predicting what are the moisture levels that are going to be appropriate for each of those levels of your rain garden. And then you've got this plant list to draw from that works for Southeast Michigan to figure out what plants are going to survive. So you can really effectively predict what plants are going to make it. So you're only buying plants once. You're not buying and replacing and replacing and replacing. We try to save you from having to do the trial and error by building on experiences from hundreds of rain gardeners who've come before you. The last thing I'm going to show from that extensive plant list is the comments section. So there is a wealth of comments that describe what the aesthetics are for these plants, some of the factors you might want to think about. Some of it is the good, what's great about these plants. Some of it is the bad or the ugly for these plants as well. What are some of the drawbacks for some of them? How do you make sure that when you're designing the garden that people see the best parts and maybe don't see the worst parts so much? So a lot of great information for you there to build a beautiful rain garden. All right, now we've talked about plants a little bit. I'm going to step back a little bit into style, right? So as you're thinking through your style preferences for your rain garden, some of the strategies that you can use to hit those styles. This is a list that I showed you on day one of some of the just course concepts for styles, whether it's a lawn grass rain garden, which works on decent soils, i.e. not heavy clay, whether it's a manicured style of rain garden, typically we see those in the front yard more, or if it's a habitat-focused rain garden, which is most often more in the backyard, although again, this is actually a backyard shot, somebody that wanted manicured in their backyard, and this is a front yard habitat-focused rain garden. And the thing is, for most people, right, you probably fall in the spectrum of bridging with neat native, right? So it's neat looking, it's not purely habitat focused, but it still has some habitat value because you're picking native plants, mostly native plants. And the good news is that there are a lot of native plants that look great in a rain garden, that look very, very manicured, that look great year-round as well. So this is a list of just a few plants that look great and that are stellar in rain gardens, whether it's sun on this edge, shade on this edge, or some plants that can really handle both sun and shade. Some of the beautiful plants that are available that thrive in a rain garden. I want you to realize, I'm not going to go into each one of these, but know that there are great plants that are out there for you to choose from. All right, now I'm going to give you some tips for those of you that want to have the manicured look in your garden, some basic concepts that you can use to help you hit that. So number one is going to be simplifying the plant selection. The fewer plants that you show in your rain garden, the better it's going to be from a manicured perspective. The more plants you add, the messier it tends to look. So this garden on the left has just two species, brown fox edge as a ground cover, and then a tree texture as well. And this sort of aesthetic, this really fits especially for those of you that are in front yard lawn grass communities where if you don't have 100% lawn in your front yard, you're doing something wrong, right? This kind of garden would fit perfectly within that kind of aesthetic and look great. The picture on the right doesn't actually have a rain garden in it, but I think it really fits most people's conceptions of what a manicured garden might look like, right? A lot of open spaces with the mulch, the rocks are giving structure, that boxwood hedge is giving great structure as well, and that is probably an invasive burning bush right there, so don't draw everything from this. But what I want you to imagine is there's no reason a rain garden couldn't go right behind this thing. And then you've got this great facer, great structured facer, and then a rain garden right in the back there where you could even have the 4 to 5 foot tall native species that most people try to avoid when they're thinking manicured, and they pop just right up above these plants and fit in very, very nicely. So even if you're in a very manicured environment, there are ways to fit rain gardens in very nicely. The last tip I'm going to give you for this is use at least 30% grasses. So grasses, and up to 70% or more with grasses. Grasses are kind of like the white space in a garden design. They help to tie everything together very, very nicely, and they make your garden look very, very neat. Grasses tend to have 9 to 12 months out of the year of looks to them, whereas a lot of the flowers tend to only look good for maybe 3 months of the year. So adding grasses in really, really helps. All right, so we did some manicured tips. I'm going to shift now into some habitat tips. I know we've got a lot of habitat gardeners on here, and I want to give you some tips for how to get your rain garden to provide the most habitat value possible. And so one tip is going to be, well, actually really all the habitat tips are to maximize native plant diversity. So the more species, generally the better. But within that, I want you to think about a couple different ways of thinking about diversity. So one is diversity in bloom times. So trying to make sure that your garden is blooming throughout the year, so it's always providing a nectar resource. And you might think about some of the native plants that really stretch the season. So on the left here is leatherwood. It's a shrub that blooms as early as March. It blooms in March in Michigan, April as well. So it's one of the earliest bloomers out there. So some of our early bees really like that to get their nectar resources. And then more commonly, wild strawberry, which is all along the berm in this picture. Wild strawberry commonly gets planted as a berm texture plant. That blooms in May and provides very, very early nectar for a lot of bee species. And then of course, right, it's got great strawberries that come in if you can beat the squirrels to them. So it's a great plant to be planting. It can spread into lawns though, so you want to be careful about that. And then you might think about witch hazel, which is a great native shrub. It's not going to want to go in the bottom of a rain garden. You could put it in the upland area next to a rain garden. That's going to be blooming as late as November. So that really helps to stretch your season. And then you can think about plants that bloom in between. Next, when we think about diversity, I want you to think about diversity in plant type. So not just flowering plants, but also grasses. And we already talked about how 30% grasses makes your garden look better generally from a manicured perspective. It's also adding more diversity in. Grasses tend to support especially skippers, grasshoppers, so a slightly different palette of insects. And they also can look stellar. Sedges especially. This is a gray sedge, and you can see that gnarly seed head on there. Some really cool structure that will come in from that. Sedges oftentimes do really well in the very bottom, the very wettest part of a rain garden, and oftentimes in some of the part shade shadier areas, although some of them can do great in full sun. Grasses tend to want it a little bit drier, so they tend to be more the side of a basin or the upland area next to a basin. Panic grass, or panicum, switchgrass. Switchgrass is one of the few grasses that actually can survive in the bottom area of many rain gardens and get you some great structure. So getting some grasses in there is a part of your diversity. And then next, I want you to think about structural diversity for your plants. And by that, I mean not just perennials, but also shrubs a little bit bigger, and then trees. So that structure, so you're filling in height especially, and woody plants mixed in with your perennials. That is really one of the most important types of diversity, especially if you're a bird gardener. Having those shrubs is really one of the most important things. Most residential neighborhoods are almost entirely lacking in shrubs, in the shrub layer, and that's a layer that birds really like. So if you can add some shrubs in with your rain garden, that can be a great way to support habitat. I've got a few of them pictured here. Elderberry can potentially go in the bottom or the side of a rain garden. Ninebark, depending on the conditions, likes it on the side. And then serviceberry or juneberry is another great plant that can work in or next to a rain garden. And then lastly, we talked a bit about trees yesterday. Here are 3 tree species that can work in the bottom of a rain garden. If you have heavy, heavy clay, you might think about putting them on the side instead of the bottom. They'll thank you for it. But river birch, red maple, swamp white oak, you can see all of these doing well on the bottom of rain gardens. And so if you can add trees in there especially, you're adding so much value by getting that extra structural diversity. All right, so that's my orientation to planting for you there, right? A little bit of a teaser, ways to think about what the conditions are gonna be in your rain garden, the hydrology, how wet's it gonna be, what are the soils, what are the sun conditions, how you go about thinking about what plants are gonna make sense in each of those areas, and then some of the functions that you want those plants to provide for you as well, tolerating drought, tolerating water, looking good so that we're making a case for rain gardens beyond your home, into your neighborhood. The thing that helps people most to try something new in their yard is if they can see it somewhere first, especially in their neighborhood. So for those of you that are going to be leaders in your neighborhood especially, maybe building the first rain garden that's in your neighborhood, Start in the backyard so you get some practice, and then make it look great in your front yard using some of these tips. And that is the best way to make the argument to your neighbors to try it out as well. You're oftentimes introducing them to something they've never heard of before, and you're showing them a great strategy that solves problems, real problems that people deal with, whether it's those icy sidewalks, water in the basement. You can be a leader that's helping to solve problems for your neighbors by making these gardens look great in your front yard area. All right, so moving on, we're getting close to time. I'm going to wrap things up on my end with a little bit of discussion about some of the resources available to you through the RAINSMART program. Then I'm going to take about 5 minutes of questions on plants, maybe 10 minutes, and then we're going to shift into our Master Rain Gardener panel. So RAINSMART resources for you. I want to make sure you know about the website, the rouge.org/RAINSMART. Everything we've talked about today, I try to make it available for you in written form on there. And then once you're done with your rain garden, or if you plant a rain barrel or install a rain barrel, you can report it to us there so we know. And that helps us to hit our metrics of 1,000 rain gardens or 6,000 rain barrels by 2025. Next, I want to make sure you know about the Master Rain Gardener Training Program. We're going to be holding a hybrid version of the course starting this fall, late September through October. So it's going to be mostly virtual through the classroom component, and then we'll have live tours. So we'll all meet up as a group outdoors, socially distanced, wearing masks to visit some rain gardens in the Southfield area. So you can apply right now at the rouge.org/MRG. I hope you can join me in the fall. If you liked what you've heard through Rain Gardens 101, it's going to be similar to that, but far more in depth, with a lot more information and a lot more support for you one-on-one each step of the way as you build towards your plan. So it's a great experience to have. And you might hear more about it from Brenda and from Marie on the call today. I want you to know that there's an end of season sale going on right now at the Rouge store. So if you're interested in getting native plants, composters, rain barrels, we've got a September 9th order deadline. This is going to be the lowest price that all of these are available all year long. I think we've got 25% off prices going right now. So this is a great place to get resources. And if you're looking for rain garden plants, we actually have a rain garden kit available. So a great, easy way to get plants for your rain garden that work in most conditions. Next, I want you to make sure you know about the RAINSMART coach experience. So you can hire me directly to help support you at your home. And we've got a half-an-hour rate. So we just have a call to help talk you through your problems. Or you can bring me out to your home for a consultation at your home. We can do soil borings, and I can get you a concept plan for your rain garden. So those are some of the services that we offer here at Friends of the Rouge. And then second to last, I want to make sure you know that you can be a part of Rouge River Restoration as a member. Laura, do you want to take a minute to talk about membership?
Always. So, you know, Friends of the Rouge is a group of members or friends like you who care a lot about improving the environment in Southeast Michigan and around our river. You know, I like to say that we Michiganders, we love our fresh water, and we travel the entire state to enjoy our beautiful beaches and our gorgeous lakes. And most of us would never let a child go in the river in our own backyard. And we can do better for the river. It is simply too polluted even today. So, Friends of the Rouge is working to change that, to make a river we can all sit by with our kids and splash in and enjoy. And becoming a member helps promote education events like this one and environmental education and action throughout the watershed. So I welcome you to become a friend today. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Laura. All right, and with that, we're going to wrap things up here. So as with the previous 2 days, here is the link for the door prize course evaluation registration form. And yesterday's is fixed now. I'm pretty sure this one's going to work, but I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong. And thanks once more to our sponsors, Pure Oak and Water in the city of Southfield, for helping to make today happen. We will do the prize drawing on September 2nd, so next week on Wednesday is when we'll do that drawing and announce the winners. So with that, I'm very glad to take questions for Laura. I think we'll do maybe 5-10 minutes of questions, maybe if we get a lot of questions coming in, and then we'll shift over to our panel. And today, actually, we can go longer than 1 o'clock. So if we end up getting questions from everyone that are going beyond the 1 o'clock time frame, we can stick around for it as well.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, we have a few questions. Hi, Natalie. First question is from our friend Natalie. She wonders if you need to water the first 3 years during the dry seasons.
Gotcha. Yeah, so the first year is most important, right? Especially the first 3 month period after the plants are in place. You want to be watering. It's about an inch of water a week. The first month, you want to do a ½ inch twice a week. And then you can start relaxing after that a little bit to more like once a week, 1 inch or so. And then after that first year, after the plants have had 1 year to get established, for the most part, they don't need to be watered again, except if we get like a 3-4 week period of drought and extreme heat. We had 1 or 2 of those periods this summer where I had some of my gardeners go out and water their plants to try to make sure that they stayed alive. After that, if you're picking the right plants for the right place, as we guide you through this rain garden education, you shouldn't need to water the plants again, right? We're all striving for as low maintenance garden as possible, and part of that is not using city water to keep our plants alive.
Okay, thank you so much. Kathleen wonders, we've talked a lot about trees and we've talked a lot about easements, and we have questions on both.
Okay.
Kathleen is wondering if anything will grow where a huge maple tree was cut down.
Yeah. So what I have heard recommended, and this is an example of where I'm a generalist, I'm not an arborist. I've heard recommended that you want to plant something new 10 feet away from an old tree, just because of the roots, the stump. As the roots are breaking down, they can make it hard for something else to grow there. That said, I've tested it a little bit on my own and planted something about 5 feet away, and I haven't had a problem with it. So the general guidance, as I understand it, is you probably don't want to plant right on top of it. Even if it was the perfect place, you want to plant a little bit farther away for a new tree, especially. But you should be able to plant perennials right up close to it.
Thank you, Matthew. This next one is from Lynn. Lynn, I'm so glad you made it onto Zoom from Facebook. She
Yeah.
is wondering, glad you're here. She is wondering if she can plant a rain garden between her sidewalk and the ditch next to her street in her Farmington Hills front yard.
Between the sidewalk and the ditch. So that's going to be a right-of-way area, city owned. You might need to get permission from the city to do something there. Generally, communities love to see rain gardens, and so they will probably be supportive of you. They might give you guidelines to help make sure that what you're doing is going to help maintain public health and safety. But that said, it kind of depends on the width of your ditch, right? If it's getting just sidewalk water, then it doesn't need to be a very big rain garden because that sidewalk isn't a whole lot of hard surface. I've had a number of gardeners that have just built rain gardens right in the ditches themselves, which, especially if you're the highest person in the ditch, like that really is essentially a rain garden. If you're not the highest person in the ditch, it's really almost more like a wetland. But it's sort of the idea of, turf grass in those ditches. It doesn't always look that good. You can't really mow it very easily in the bottom. And so if you can plant plants that can survive in those conditions, more wetland plants, then you're getting something that's going to be prettier, it's going to provide more habitat value potentially, and also probably help with water management a little bit more. So whether you've got a little bit of space between your sidewalk and the ditch, or you're planting in the ditch itself, those are both potential options, but either way, you probably want to check with your community first to get permission before you start digging in that area, because it's not your property, and there's going to be guidelines for how you can do it safely. All right, Laura, I'll take maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll shift it over to our panelists of Master Rain Gardeners.
Sounds good. Welcome back, Paulette. She is curious if fall is the best time for digging and planting a rain garden.
Generally, my impression is that spring is probably the absolute best time for it. But that said, fall is also a good time, and in some ways, fall can be better. I actually like to do my school gardens in the fall, because if I can plant them right after the drought hits, then they've got typically nice weather for a couple weeks in fall to start getting established, and then they've got all of spring really to start getting established before the summer drought hits. And so for gardens like that, where I know the plants are probably going to be abused a little bit, I like to plant in the fall is really my best time. But that said, if it's your home and you're able to water through the summertime without a problem, then spring is going to give them the longest season to really get established before the winter hits, and before you get a lot of snow and ice on top of them. So both times are good, both spring and fall. You can even plant in the summertime as long as you're really careful to keep the plants alive, watered through the drought period. But spring and fall tend to be the best. And
Okay,
right with our plant sale, we've got the pickup on September 19th. At Friends of the Rouge, we planted up until the end of September successfully. So you've got if you join that plant sale, you've got a week or so really to get your plants in the ground, and that's still a great time. All right,
that's fantastic.
one more question, Lara.
Sure, and then we'll have a couple more that are unanswered, and you may be able to get to those at the tail end.
That
But
sounds great.
the last one from Troy, does it make sense to direct rainwater from the roof and then underneath a sidewalk to a good area for the garden?
Yeah, that can work fine, right? It's a little harder to dig under a sidewalk, but it's the reality is it's sometimes just what you have to do to be able to get the water away from your home and to get it into a suitable area. The internet has a ton of videos showing ways that you can dig under a sidewalk. So it's absolutely possible. Many people have done it before. You can do it too. And sometimes that's just what you have to do to solve the icing problems on that sidewalk to get the water away from your home, is to go underneath the sidewalk. The issue to watch out for is that when you go underneath the sidewalk, you're losing elevation. And so sometimes it can be hard if you've got a really flat area to get the water to flow properly. So sometimes what you need to do is have the pipe connecting to your downspout actually go up like 4 or 5 feet up the wall, and that helps it build up head pressure. So as the water starts to back up, it gets to be more and more pressure helping to push water through the system there, right? So that's if you're in a low slope environment, you might need to do that if you're going under a sidewalk. It's just to have the pipe really go up far along the house. All right, and with that, I'm gonna transition us over to our panelists. So we've got Brenda Dietrich and we've got Marie Everett with us today. Both are Master Rain Gardener graduates who took the course, designed their own rain garden, and built it within the last year or two. They are gonna share about 3 to 5 minutes or so of their stories building their rain gardens. And then after they've both gone, we're gonna open it up to a final Q&A with you, the audience, to pick their brains about what was hard, what was easy, what worked for them, what didn't, as they went through the process of building their own rain gardens at their homes. So without further ado, I'm going to end our presentation here. Try to stop a share. Here's our panelists here, our lovely panelists. And Marie, are you comfortable going first?
I am, and I am sharing my screen right now. So I should be here.
There you go. We can see it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Marie Everett. I'm a master rain gardener. I did my rain gardens last year, as well as I've been applying a lot of the knowledge to other areas of the garden. This slide is to give you a little bit of information of kind of what I'm dealing with. On the right-hand side, you can see kind of a lot of garden, and that's in the lower level of my yard. Let me see, oops, wrong one. Right up here, you see a hill, and that hill, it's at the top of there where the rain gardens are. Basically, the lower level is, I call it kind of my big rain garden. It's floodplain, so it's wet down there. I've been focusing on adding, you can see I'm a habitat gardener. And I've been looking at adding host plants for about every butterfly I can find that can be found around here. On the left-hand side over here, you see my 2 helpers in the garden. And I say that a little tongue-in-cheek because as we go along, you'll see some damage from them, and also some things I put in place along the way when I plant to try to protect things from them. So I've got 3 rain gardens. We'll start with the smallest one, which I call a mini rain garden. So at the end of the steps, coming down, this is basically a river coming down steps to this area when it rains hard. But it's the only space I had. So I used what I had. You can see here, this was before. This is a picture of the plan that I had from class. And then after, I ended up switching out the St. John's wort for the fern because I don't water. So it has to be able to survive without it. And then over here, you can see it does drain quickly, though this shows that I needed to change the path to pitch it. So when it does drain down, the rest of the water drains to it. So I'll move on to the next spot. And both of these first two are what I would call sandy loam. The first one I wanted to do deeper, but because of tree roots from a Japanese maple, I couldn't go as deep as I wanted. So this is a picture showing I tried starting to dig trenches to get water flowing. This was before I took the class, to figure out how to get the water moved where I wanted it, which is away from the foundation of the gazebo. So from class, this was what I put together for the plan instead of doing a layout, because it was February and this area was covered with ice and snow. And so I couldn't even really take any good measurements, much less to put a plan together. So I took some pictures and stitched them together and laid it out. And basically this area here is sloped down to this deeper area. And this is right after it's planted. You'll see that I used something a little different. I used pine needles for mulch. You can see the like fencing here because the dogs like to run through this way. You see a plant support here that was to try to keep the dogs out of destroying things. And you can see where the dog tore out the side of the gazebo, going after a chipmunk. So I have a lot of plant supports that are put around plants, not because the plants need to be supported, but they need to be protected. So this is today, what it looks like. Still making tweaks. One of the things is adding some broken up concrete stepping stones around this edge, because I found I made this area relatively deep, and so that was a sharp ledge. So to help out with that, I've added those. So I'm going to go into the third one, which was at a friend's house with heavy clay. And so you'll see when we started looking at the soil, I first put a time on it. And then 2 days later, I realized I didn't need a time on it because it doesn't drain. So you can see where we started laying hose to figure out kind of contours for the garden. You can see here where these are. And then back here is a berm. So her backyard sloped down from the house to the back with a berm at the back. So this lower part was always underwater. She used to have a duck sitting out there, you know, a duck decoy. So here's the plan that we put together and started. When asking about a good time to dig, if you're in heavy clay and you're in an area that is wet, I would highly suggest like to start digging now. We did this in the spring, and we literally, to get to work in the middle of it, had to take sheets of plywood and move them to stand on them because we would sink and get stuck. So if you have heavy clay and you have that situation, now would be a good time to start digging. After digging out a lot of the clay, she brought in soil mixed with sharp sand in it to help out with the drainage. This is right after planting. A number of the plants were taken from other areas of her garden and put in. And today it's working very well. I mean, within a day, there's no water visible. Even her husband was really, really skeptical in the beginning and thought we were kind of nuts. And he has said, I can't believe it works. So, and it's only on year 2. So that's it.
All right, Marie, thank you so much for sharing. We appreciated learning from your experiences here. It's amazing you built 3 gardens in this time. And I love how you started with the small ones and then worked your way up. I think that's a really great way to go. All right, we're gonna pass the mic over to Brenda now. Brenda, I'm gonna take away the sharing from Marie, and then, let's see, I think
that might be you.
Yeah, oh, there we go. Stop share. There we go. Okay. Right. I love how we practice this to get you all up on it, and then I'm the one goofing up. All right, Brenda. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm Brenda Dietrich, and I'm a Master Rain Gardener, as Matthew said, but I'm also an Advanced Master Gardener volunteer with MSU. And I like to say I'm a kind of a Minnesotan living in Michigan. I've been here about 6 years, and gardening and becoming the Master Gardener has really connected me with a lot of people and volunteer opportunities, and really helped me feel comfortable with the move. So I tend to plant a lot of native and pollinator plants in my yard. And I also have this doggy, Tara. She's less than 2, and she is kind of a terror to the garden. There's actually like a deer path through this garden from her. So that's been something to work around, but she also just likes to lay around, so she can do both. And I also plant vegetables, and in the bottom left here, this is one of my rain gardens that we'll be talking about. The reason that I was interested in rain gardens, one, my family has been fishermen forever. A lot of them live on lakes or near lakes. This is my son. He just loves fishing. So we care about protecting the waters. I live in Grosse Pointe Farms, so we live right near Lake St. Clair, and we have combined sewers in our city. So all of our water, if it drains to the street and large rains, there's overflow, and some of that goes into the lake. And then this one is just a picture of my mom's garden. It goes down into the lake here, and I've been helping her with this tiered garden. So it's kind of fun. So I have 2 examples from my yard. One, we had a lot of water collecting in our yard, and we sort of decided, or Matthew said, this could be a turf rain garden, and it totally could. It drained fast enough. We have kind of loamy clay, but it wasn't necessarily desirable from us. I realized through the class and by just looking around that we were getting water from our house, from this downspout. We were getting a ton of water from our neighbor's house. They have 4 downspouts pointing all our directions. So I wanted to work on figuring out how to move that water to someplace more acceptable to me and still away from the foundation. So what we did is we did some changing of the grade and put in the rain garden in the front yard. So the rain garden I'm going to show you is up here in the front yard. So here's my design from the class. So this is off my driveway. It's It's going to collect the rain from my driveway. It's going to collect from a buried pipe off my downspout and a pipe from my neighbor's downspout. It's very shady, it's part shade. So I really tried to pick those plants off of that master list that Matthew showed us that could handle all sun, because I didn't want just the low growing shade plants. I wanted some height too and some color. So so these are some of the things I picked off of the list that could really handle most conditions. And here's just a picture of how we changed the grade a little bit. So now more of the water is kind of collecting along the fence, but it also, there's a slight grade so it can go to the front. It's pretty slow. So what the rain garden gets is mostly the water that's directed there from pipes. And here's my before and after. So you can't see the pipe, but it is underneath the concrete that was replaced. And we'll see that later in another slide. And then it comes out here. And so this is what it looks like here. And then I have another one from my neighbors over here coming down under these bushes. And my plants are really small. And I know Julian asked about rabbits too. My experience with rabbits is they will eat some of the small plants, but once they get established, they're usually fine. I have these cages around my liatris. They have not been able to get very big up there because of the rabbits. So I've tried to keep cages on them until they can get a little bigger. All right, and then here's my after. So this stuff's growing up, but it's not growing up super fast. But what I want to show here is that I really tried to fit this design into my existing line. So there's kind of this half circle around my front yard on either side of my driveway. And because I wanted this to look good from the street, thinking about that line and how it fits in is kind of important for the visual. And then we had rain, I guess 2 weeks ago or so. And so I went upstairs and opened the window and took a couple pictures because it was really filled up. And so this right here is some of that that's just draining off of the yard and from my neighbor. But and then this is coming from the pipes. And this does drain fairly quickly in just a couple hours. Okay, and then I have a second spot, and we were getting a ton of water on our back door where we just had a piece of plywood there because we couldn't even get in and out of our back door most of the year. And so our main solution to this was we needed to fix the concrete. But part of the problem was that our garage is lower than our house. So we didn't want to just force all the water away from the house into the garage. So we were able to put in a channel drain, and the channel drain, sorry, I don't know who's here and I'm not going to get it, but the channel drain is connected to another one of those corrugated pipes. So you can see it right here. And it comes out over here, right where Tara is standing. There's going to be a new rain garden. And this is, obviously we did a ton of construction last year. The front garden didn't have all this, work, but you can do a lot of work or you can do a little work. And then this one is more of an after picture. And just the rain comes down the gutter, and that one's buried, and this one's buried also. So here you can see both of them coming out into the garden. And I wanted to show that this works pretty well in the winter time and the early spring too. So even when the ground is frozen, in January we had that super weird rain, and this filled all the way up and froze. And the next day my dog came out and was kind of trying to walk in there, and the water was already gone. So it was really cool to show that it filled up and it sunk in. And then the same thing in March. And the back rain garden has a lot more sun. So here's what it looks like now after 1 year. And more liatris and more iris in this one. And that's what I've got, Matthew.
Wonderful, Brenda. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate having the chance to see all the hard work that you put into your home. And it's, so many of us have, a legacy of just terrible drainage from, sometimes from how it was built, and then sometimes just how the soil has settled over 50 years. So I love to see how you were able to take the concepts and really, do a really significant revision to really solve those problems for the long term. It's really great to see all that all adds up together. So with that, Laura, if you're still there, we will kick this out to the audience if anyone has any questions. And I actually might kick it off with one question for you both, which was just what was the hardest part of your experience in building your rain gardens, and how did you overcome it?
For me, the most difficult was the one at the friend's house with clay. And digging that clay was difficult, particularly in the muddy mess of the spring. And I'll add, we were kind of forced to try to quickly do it because she was going to be on the garden walk last year in June. So we had to get it done far enough ahead to give the plants at least a few weeks to settle in before the walk, which meant we had to get it done in the mess.
No pressure, right? All right, Laura, are there any questions from the audience?
Yes, I'm laughing because I can't imagine a more pressure-filled situation for a garden, the garden walk. Okay, thank you if you've been waiting, and I'm glad to see so many of you still here. Dario asks, something that you've been covering, so it's a topic of interest, is can you do a rain garden above or adjacent to a septic field?
Oh, I'll maybe answer that question because that's really less for the panelists. We went over that yesterday, so I'll refer the questioner to take a look at that. The answer is you really want to avoid a septic field. Those are carefully designed to manage all of your household's waste, and we just don't want to mess with that. So stay away from that.
Okay, great. And then Lauren has a question, and this could be for anyone, I think. She says, I have a corner in my yard that floods whenever it rains. It's a low point. However, a giant maple is in the middle of this flood spot. Any suggestions?
All right. So low spot next to the house, and there's a giant maple there. This sounds like, well, A, the maple is doing some good things, helping solve the problem. So even if you can't build the rain garden, the things to look at would be, is there any way you can get the water farther away? Can you pipe it somewhere? Just to be able to get it to where you can manage it if it's not right there. And then beyond that, it's going to be contextual almost. We'd have to just take a look at it and see whether we can come up with any solutions that might work. You could think about possibly, maybe you can't generally dig a big rain garden there, but maybe you can find a spot where there's not much for roots and do something like, forgetting what it's called now all of a sudden, but a dry well. Potentially to handle the water. So there's some options available. All right. I'd love to get a question for the panelists if there's anyone that's queued up with that.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any more questions. You're welcome, Lauren, in the Q&A or the chat box.
Right. Well, then maybe I'll toss another question out there for the panelists. Actually, I'll toss the question to you, Brenda, that I tossed to Marie, which is just what was the hardest part of your experience in building your rain gardens, and how did you overcome it?
Okay, well, one thing was where I wanted to put it originally, there was trees and there was just other issues. And so getting the mindset around where can I direct the water to versus where is the water. I don't know. I think I don't know. It wasn't too hard for us, other than there was a lot of physical labor, but we knew we were in for that because we were doing the concrete and we knew we were kind of in for it. So the physical labor part, but it was just a lot of fun for me.
Great. Yeah, you kind of had such a big garden to be dealing with it. Like the rain gardens were probably the minor part of that overall project.
Yeah, and I guess I would say directing the water, the contractors didn't quite understand the concept of what I was doing. So when they first put that pipe, I mean, they put the corrugated pipe in under the concrete, the one that's in the front of the house, but then they just buried it. in the grass, and because it's kind of clay, it was just not going to work. So it was really mushy there, and the water was just backing up. So I had to, I didn't want it buried, but I had to unbury it because of just what they were doing and what I was trying to do. So there was a little bit of the contractors not understanding the concept.
Yeah, that is not uncommon. And that's actually partially why on our website we put together a list of professionals that do rain gardens. So that way folks can find contractors that are able to do the jobs well. All right, great. My next question for you both, and Laura, feel free to interrupt if anything comes through from the audience, is just how your neighbors have responded to your rain gardens. And Marie, I know yours are backyard, so maybe there's been less of a response there. So it's maybe how your garden club's members have responded. But Brenda, since yours is front yard, have you had any neighbors talk to you about it?
A little bit. I do see people stop and look at the sign when they walk by. I definitely think there's still a huge learning curve because they think, oh, it's a water garden. It's not really a water garden. There's no water in it. So that sort of thing. But what's encouraging in my community is that the Grosse Pointe Garden Tour is wanting to focus on finding those rain gardens in the community for the tour next year. The tour this year got canceled. So I will get to be on the tour next year.
Nice.
And actually be able to talk to it about people and talk about how important it is to protect the lake. So my immediate neighbors, I think, their yard doesn't look that great. So I think as long as it looks fine, they're fine with it. So
it's sort of like you don't have to run faster than the tiger, you just trip your friends sort of philosophy of gardening, right?
Yeah, I mean, I personally want it to be filled in more because it's in the front and it's not, the stuff's not growing in that fast because of the shade. So I might just throw more stuff in there to make it look more mature.
There you go. Yeah. Marie, did you have any thoughts about just reception of your garden?
Well,
you can think about your friend's garden that you helped with as well that was on that garden tour. Like, did people respond to it?
Yeah, well, it's funny because she didn't have a sign out there that said it was a rain garden. So that would have helped a lot. When I was back there during it, and I would stop people who were coming through and ask them if they saw the rain garden, they're like, what rain garden? They had no clue that it had a job. So I guess there's a plus to that because it fit in. Yeah, it fit into everything else.
That's for me the best compliment is somebody says, wait, what, there's a rain garden there? That means that, yeah, it fit in. And that's why I've got the signs, right? Is I want people to know it's a rain garden.
Right, right.
And if they don't know.
And for our garden walks, we'd like to get more gardens that have rain gardens in them. So if you're in Plymouth or Canton and you have a yard with rain gardens, and give us a ring.
All right. My next question for you both is, for all the folks that are listening, right, is there any major piece of advice that you give them? And you could think about maybe like if there was one thing you could have done differently in your rain gardens, like what's the thing that they should know as they're starting to get into it themselves?
I'd say start small. Like I did the mini one first, and then I did the next one, and then I did the one with my friend, which was all last spring. Probably not the optimal.
Yeah, I think especially now with COVID, it's hard to find plants. So, and there was some plants that I originally wanted, and I guess it's not like it's so hard to find plants. Nurseries are open, but it's hard to find the exact ones you want sometimes. So maybe do some of that research up front to see who's got things in stock, but also have alternatives. I had to switch out a couple of mine because I couldn't find, well, let's see, rocket. It's a rocket. It's like a yellow
Ligularia?
Yeah, I couldn't find that, and I couldn't find senna, and then I ended up getting both of them later, but I couldn't find them at first, so I had to switch some stuff out. And I was calling around and people just didn't have them. So make some friends, I guess, too, that have natives in their yards.
Well, because most of the lower area of my yard is wet, most of what's there is good rain garden plants. And every year I'm separating plants and giving them away. So if people are looking for rain garden plants, you may be able to get free ones from other people.
We have a couple of questions from folks who are still listening. One is, tell us more about the signs. Matthew, you mentioned you stick a rain garden sign up because you want people to really know it's a rain garden.
Yeah,
How would you get a sign? Yeah.
If you build a front yard rain garden, let me know about it, right? You don't have to take the Master Rain Gardener course to get certified as a Master Rain Gardener. Really, if you build a rain garden that is a rain garden that it works, that's the core that I need to see. That tells me that you were able to, whether it's through this class or elsewhere, to get the knowledge that you needed. And then we would love to have a sign on your garden so that way folks in your neighborhood know what it is and know the value of it. It's part of the effort to engage your neighbors in this overall 1,000 rain garden campaign. So if you do go ahead and build a rain garden, definitely let me know. Would love to certify you. That'd be great.
I just shared your email address with everyone.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'll look forward to the flurry of emails tomorrow, right? After you all finish digging today and planting. Right?
We've got a question too from Lynn, who's been waiting very patiently about a wascally wabbit question for Brenda. Can you describe your, she's very interested in how you created those rabbit screens and wanted to know like how you fasten them around the plant so that rabbits don't push them down.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that I had those screens on is a fairly thick metal mesh. It's less than an inch. I don't know where I got that from, but I got some other stuff this year from critterfence.com, and it's not super cheap, but it's strong. They can't bite through it, and I've used that in my vegetable gardens. But so if it's stiff enough metal, I can make that ring. And then what I usually use for my posts is looking at it, the stuff you can put electrical lines through, conduit. I use conduit for my stakes, and then just take a little bit of like wire and attach that cage to the conduit, and then hammer the conduit into the ground.
I use a lot of rebar for stakes for things, and earth staples to staple things down. So I don't have a rabbit problem in my backyard because I have dogs that the rabbits try to stay away from.
Yeah, this was in my front yard. The backyard is the backyard is safer. Like everybody's complaining about their tomatoes, and I have so many tomatoes because the squirrels aren't getting them.
Because your dog is probably protecting.
Probably from the dog. I don't know. I don't know what else. But
got to bring the dogs back into the conversation here, right?
Yeah. Well, I have one that kills anything that doesn't belong. So.
All right. I'm trying to think if we've got any more questions for you as panelists. Let's see. So one question I've got for you both is just about the sizing of your rain gardens, whether or not you follow it. And right, I'm not trying to catch you up here, but whether you followed the sizing guidelines that we give in the course. And if you did, how is it working out for you? If you didn't, how's it working out for you? Like what's your experience been in relation to that course guidance? And it's okay if you ignored me. Everyone's home is different, and my goal is that you become an expert on your home, and so ultimately you get to pick the sizing that works for you. So go ahead.
I'll talk about mine. My front one is very close to that 20% because I had the space, but I also wanted to stay within that kind of existing landscape line. So it's very close to that 20%, and it's draining well enough. The clay isn't so thick that I have seen it overflow. I've seen it overflow once, and I've seen evidence that it has overflowed a bit. But typically I feel like it doesn't even fill up in the normal rains. The one that I have in the backyard is very small, and partly was we were already removing turf and we didn't want to remove that much turf because we have the dog, we have a kid, and then I have the vegetable garden. So it's very small and it's very deep. It's like you wouldn't want to step in it. The dog jumps over it or runs around it, and it holds pretty well, but it doesn't quite meet those guidelines because it's a little too small and too deep.
But is it working?
It works fine. I mean, that's the winter one.
That's what counts, right?
Yeah.
That's what counts.
So I will say both of them in my yard are way undersized of what they should be. Particularly the mini rain garden, but that's just all the space there was. Now I've added some additional things to help take that up. And it drains so quickly, so it's not really a big issue. The other one, while it was undersized, it doesn't fill up. So,
and that's, your soils are so sandy there that
Right.
you were actually working more in the 10% guideline, I think, in terms of the sizing. So you're actually not that far from it in terms of what a sandy condition can handle. And right at the end of the day, it's like, even if you can't hit the general guidelines, maybe whatever you can do is better than what is there now. And as long as you can manage having the water backing up, as it looked like it was doing in one of your gardens a little bit to drain away, even if it's a marginal improvement, that's better than nothing.
Well, that's what I figured, because that was that's the only space there was. So, and the other one is completely surrounded by concrete. There is no more space.
You did everything you could within it. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're going to be getting close to the end of our time here. So before we wrap up, I'm just going to toss it out to either of you, Brenda or Marie, if you've got any final words that you'd like to give for any of these novice rain gardeners here as they're thinking about getting started at their home.
I'm wondering about Lynn's question, actually, about milkweed. I do not have milkweed in mine, but I think you could. I was thinking about putting some swamp milkweed in one of mine and trying it. I have it in other locations in my yard, and I also have a monarch way station. So I don't know. I keep them separate, but I think you could try it.
Looking at that question, I have swamp milkweed in the lower part of my yard in like the wettest area, and it is doing very well. I have the other varieties of milkweed elsewhere where it's not quite as wet, like the butterfly weed.
The butterfly weed for sure.
I've got world milkweed that's in an area that's up just a little bit more and a little drier, and then I'm working on another type of milkweed that will go in my really dry area. So.
All right, great. All right, well, thank you, Marie and Brenda. I hope, audience, everyone, let's give them a round of applause. Right, I'm sure you can feel right through the internet ether, right, all of the warm, good feelings they're sending your way. Thank you both so much for sharing your experiences here with the audience. And thank you, Laura, again, for your help here with moderating. Thank you to the audience for sticking with us for the past 3 days to wrap up Rain Gardens 101, Get Your Lawn a Job. I hope that you've come away with the basics that you need to start thinking about how you go through all the major skill sets you need for a rain garden, from locating where it's going to go to calculating what size would be a good goal to aim for based on the hard surface, to thinking about how to dig it, to thinking about how to plant it. If you've got further questions, if you need to dive down, drill down any deeper into any of that, our website, therouge.org/RAINSMART, is a great place to go to get those resources, or I'd be glad to arrange a consultation with you to give you extra support. I look forward to being in touch with you, whether it is just through the RAINSMART Facebook group, asking questions on there, whether it's through the Master Rain Gardener course, or just seeing you out and about in the community. I wish you the greatest success as a rain gardener, and I hope you'll be in touch. So have a wonderful day, everyone. And stay safe through the rest of this COVID-19 pandemic. I hope you use the time to some good digging. All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone. We're going to close things down.
Thank you.